Oh, I know you want to go. You're just outside. It's wet. Okay. All right. Say hi, Puka. Say hi, people. Hello. Hi, Fukushima. All right. Yeah, that's my buddy right here. All right. So. Okay. All right. Okay. 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 All right. Okay. All right. See, that's the great thing about dogs. They just are. They do what they do. They know what they are. They just are themselves all the time. That's what we humans should try to figure out how to do because we get so filled with all these neuroses and these self-esteem issues and worried about what we look like on camera and what people think about us. So, anyways, you know, I left off, well, I don't know, a while ago, but talking about rights. We're talking a little bit about uh, rights. Now, the difference between rights, perfect and imperfect rights, and perfect and imperfect obligations. You know, we've said, and it says in the Book of Law of Nations, we talked about that your rights flow from your obligations, meaning your obligations, and your duties are the activities that you undertake in order to meet those obligations and get the corresponding rights and benefits. So there's internal and external, and of course, obviously, internal is what you think about, some of your belief structure. Now, we have to be very careful on some of these things too, because your some of the individuals in governance like to take these words and kind of play games with them, get you caught up in some of the little rules and things that they don't tell you about, and then later on try to hold you to those. But fortunately for us, everything we operate on here in society is established firmly upon the concepts, the precepts, the principles of contracts. Now, I'm going to come back to this thing about rights, external, internal, for just a second. But it's important that people understand. Stop for just a second again, and you take yourself back to where it's just you by yourself, all alone on this planet, this conscious awareness, walking around as a human. Didn't you have the right to use everything here to survive, to do whatever? Didn't you? And then one day you're strolling along and you run into me. I was here also doing the same thing. Hmm? So we start exchanging, interchanging, talking, communicating, whatever. Okay? We come to some agreements. That's what happens between men in society. It's a naturally occurring right. It's what happens. It's a naturally occurring law, as much of a law as physics and thermodynamics and anything else, gravity. Okay? So contracts, agreements have to be predicated upon honesty, full disclosure, full understanding, because if there's not, then that puts one party at a disadvantage, doesn't it? So it's very, very important when you're going through trying to understand this information or anything you're involved in, understanding agreements and contracts. That's what's happening all the time. Okay? So when you get back to this thing about rights, obligations, internal, external, obviously internal is what you think about, okay? What somebody else might think about, what their beliefs are, what they might consciously or consent to do voluntarily for you if asked. Okay? Those are considered internal, imperfect. Okay? They're rights. Yeah, it has certain aspects of a right. Okay? And it's something that we can expect or should be able to reasonably expect, but we can't compel performance. Now, external, then, on the other hand, it deals squarely in contracts, agreements between you and I. You and the governmental officials, you and your elected officials that you believe that you have entered into an agreement with them, a contract with them by delegating some of your authority to them for them to be able to do certain things on your behalf, work together for your mutual safety and benefit. That's what we come together in societies for. But since it's external, it's also divided into perfect and imperfect. Now, a perfect right is that which is accompanied by the right of compelling. So they say about your law, they can compel you to obey, force you. And in a contract, we make certain agreements. I agree to pay you a sum of $100, and you agree to deliver me 100 apples. I have an absolute right to compel you to produce 100 apples for me, and you have an absolute perfect right to compel me to produce $100 for you. Okay? I can force you to do that because that's the term of the agreement. It's not voluntary at all. Okay? Now, since we know that rights flow from obligations, that would also mean that there's what? Imperfect and perfect obligations. Or, as it's more clearly stated in the law of nations and as constitutional law, constitutional definition is what? Indispensable obligations. You have obligations that we have, and then we have indispensable obligations, which are those that are imposed upon men by nature. So if we go to Book 2, Section 116, Law of Nations, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 10, Law of Nations, Book 2, Section 116. What are the rights of which men cannot be deprived? If an obligation, as we have before observed, gives a right to those things without which it cannot be fulfilled, every absolute, necessary, and indispensable obligation produces in this manner rights equally absolute, necessary, and indefeasible. For nature imposes no obligations on men without giving them the means of fulfilling them. They have an absolute right to the necessary use of those means. Nothing can deprive them of that right, as nothing can dispense with their fulfilling their natural obligations. Now, if you recall, reading your preliminaries, Section 8 talks about what the law of nature, and therefore the law of nations, which is simply the law of nature applied to a nation's states and sovereigns, is immutable, cannot be changed. These things cannot be legislated away. They cannot be diminished. They cannot be taxed. You cannot be denied the necessary use of things in order to meet your indispensable obligations. One of those happens to be what? Self-preservation, doesn't it? Another one also happens to be personal worship. Now, we'll talk about personal worship for just a second. It's in Book 1, Section 128, Rights of Individuals. Keeping in mind that we have necessary use of everything on this planet in our state of primitive communion. Let me cover that first, I guess, because I didn't really go into that too much. Okay. Get down here. Sorry, my notes got jumbled up around last second. So, you have rights still remaining from that state of primitive communion before there was government, before there was societies, before there was all this law, property, and dominions, what they call it. Okay. In that primitive state, when it was just you, me, people just wandering around, doing whatever, we had, without distinction, a right to the use of everything. 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 As far as is necessary to the discharge of their natural obligations. Now, if there's a plant that grows on every continent that actually produces a substance, CBD, and your body, human body, is full of CBD receptors, pretty sure that means that that plant was being utilized by men long before the institution of governments, when you had a right without distinction to the use of everything necessary to the discharge of your natural obligation. Well, self-preservation happens to be one of those, isn't it? That's a proven fact medically in science that consumption of cannabis helps maintain the body in the proper state. Helps eliminate prevent, cure, I don't know about cure, but I guess it may improve upon disease conditions in the human body that has been denied it huh, by a small criminal group. They don't have permission to deprive you, me, of the necessary use of things to the discharge of my natural obligations. So if governments are instituted between men on the consent of the governed, okay, cannot assume that the introduction of property and domain of governance should have taken place without a restriction on government to preserve to me the rights, use of these things, the necessary use of things of this nature. Okay, that's a necessary remnant of the primitive state of communion. Cannot be denied to you or me. This other thing nature does for us, our absolute right of necessity, to do what? Self-preservation, self-defense. Okay. In Book 2, Section 119, right of necessity, we thus call the right which necessity alone gives to the performance of certain actions that are otherwise unlawful, when without these actions it is impossible to fulfill an indispensable obligation. But it is carefully to be noted that in such a case the obligation must really be an indispensable one, and the act in question the only means fulfilling that obligation. If either of these conditions be wanting, the right of necessity does not exist on the occasion. Now, remember, government is just people. Your government is bound by the same laws of nature that you are. The indispensable obligations that they have to us, the rights that they get for governance come from meeting those obligations and duties, and one of those is to preserve me, protect me. Now, one of those that they have an absolute indispensable obligation to help me meet all of my indispensable obligations, all of them. Now, one of those happens to be rights of individuals, which is found in Book 1, Section 128. Now, people use that, try to use that defense about, religious expression, or the First Amendment. Well, if you read that book, Law of Nations, very carefully, you'll see in Section 126 and 127, it talks about religion publicly, out in the public, religion is squarely in the purview of the state in order to they oversee it. Now, personal worship, on the other hand, is what? Personal. Okay? Governments are instituted to protect private property, protect your individual rights, your indispensable obligations that you have got to fulfill. That's the purpose of government. Now, understand once again, Book Law of Nations, all these things I'm saying, I'm quoting to you word for word as constitutional law. It is immutable, natural law. Your legislature cannot legislate something that diminishes or prevents me from meeting any of my individual obligations, period, especially the indispensable ones. Now, they talk about religion being in the mind. We can't legislate what a man thinks or believes, but we can legislate what he does. Well, that's bullshit too. Common sense says every action is preceded by a thought. You can't legislate what I think. You can't legislate what I do. In fact, I do anything I want to. I have full, complete liberty. I may have delegated some of that. I may have agreed maybe to maybe not do some certain things, but I can still do those, can't I? Okay? I still have 100% total and complete independence and liberty here as an individual conscious awareness walking around. Okay? In your legislative body, assuming under public safety, there are compelling interests to protect the other members of society, have intruded into private spaces they have no authority to be in. None. One of those happens to be about worship, personal worship. Let's see what it says. Constitutionally says what's defined, constitutionally defined as constitutional law, immutable law. Okay? It can't be changed, legislated away, can't be ignored. Okay? We'll take it the simple, plain meaning of the words in the most constitutional light. That's what your Supreme Court says has to happen. Every man is obliged to endeavor to obtain just ideas of God, to know his laws, his views with respect to his creatures, and the end for which they were created. Oh, these lights are hurting my eyes. Sorry. Man doubtless owes the most pure love, the most profound respect to his Creator, and to keep alive these dispositions and act in consequence of them. Now, act, okay, act, is everybody pretty sure, we look up the definition of that, is what? Okay? Isn't that an outward motion, some kind? Hmm? Or pretending, even, they say actors, right? He should honor God in all his actions. Now, actions is definitely a verb. Okay? And show, well, showing is outward also, physically outward. I'm showing you this can of Dr. Pepper, okay? I'm acting by lifting it. And show by the most suitable means the sentiments that fill his mind, okay? So my thoughts might fill my mind. Okay? My actions then are designed to what? Show by the most suitable means. Now, man is essentially necessarily free to make use of his own choice in matters of religion, and you are. Huh? Buddhist, Baptist, Catholic, Mormon, whatever, okay? They don't compel you to be or not be any of those things. But there's a huge difference between being part of an organized religious group and engaging in personal worship. Now, since you're here all by yourself, conscious awareness, we have to believe then that you're here on the behalf of a creator who created you. And even if you don't necessarily believe that, I mean, most people reasonably believe that there's something going on besides you just showed up here one day. Okay? But constitutionally, you're mandated, you're commanded, you are ordered to by constitutional law to endeavor to obtain just ideas of God. Okay? And part of that is that you engage in personal worship, personal communication, a personal relationship of some kind. Now, your belief cannot be commanded. This is right out of the book again. His belief is not to be commanded as what kind of worship must that be which is produced by force. So you cannot be commanded to worship. You cannot be commanded to, as a type of worship, what you're engaging in. Let's talk about, remember, going back, all his actions showing suitable means. Defines it here very specifically. Worship consists in certain actions performed. Now, actions performed, that's something outward, physically done out here in the physical realm, not in your mind. Performed with an immediate view to the honor of God. There can be no worship proper for any man what he does not believe suitable to that end. Now, my personal worship with God, my Creator, I'm here having an experience as conscious awareness here in this physical reality. Perhaps, maybe, I'm having a conversation with my Creator, endeavoring to do, and I feel that it's necessary for me to consume certain natural substances that were here on this planet long before governance was instituted. I'm doing it in a private space, and I'm not damaging or infringing upon the rights of any other individuals of any kind. My actions are done perhaps maybe to change my the level of my awareness, my conscious awareness, changing my perception of this reality on behalf of my Creator, who isn't here to experience it. Perhaps He's experiencing it through me, through the small speck of conscious awareness that's stuck in this body, that's known as a title of Russ Jensen. That's my belief. I'm here walking around, experiencing, feeling, sensing, tasting, hearing, smelling, all those things, doing it on behalf of my Creator who can't be here for whatever reason. See? That's what He's communicated to me. And that obligation of sincerely endeavoring to know God, of serving Him, adoring Him from the bottom of the heart, being imposed on man by His very nature, it is impossible that by my engagement with society that I should have exonerated myself from that duty, or deprive myself of the liberty which is absolutely necessary for the performance of it. Of what? Huh? Of worship, personal worship, sincerely endeavoring to know my Creator. Now, if I want to ingest some natural substance that you guys consider to be unlawful, illegal, because it takes away from the profit margins of your corporate enterprises, your criminal activity, I still have a right remaining from the state of primitive communion for the necessary use of everything on this planet to meet my indispensable obligations. And one of those is worship, personal worship, endeavoring to know my Creator. My actions to show suitable means. My belief is not to be commanded. Worship consists in certain actions performed. Smoking, eating. Okay. Now, one of my other indispensable obligations is self-preservation. I also have a duty to assist my fellow men. If my fellow man happens to be my son, my daughter, my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, my grandfather, a friend whose body is being ravaged by diseases been brought about by the toxic environment that's been imposed upon me by a criminal enterprise that's taken control, seized my governance unlawfully, unconstitutionally, has attacked that very document, has severed their ties to me and my ties to them, which we'll talk about too, another segment. I have an absolute right remaining from the primitive state of communion, the necessary use of everything in order to meet my indispensable obligation of being service to my fellow men, to help them. If I want to provide them with some alternative medicinal substances that have been proven to be effective, I'm not in violation of any of your legislative acts. Your legislative acts don't apply to me in that particular situation because my right of necessity, which makes what? The use or the acts of other things that would otherwise be considered to be unlawful. But in that situation, it is necessary for me. It's the only option that I believe. My belief cannot be commanded, can it? No, it cannot. My belief decides what's necessary in that particular situation in order for me to meet my indispensable obligation of self-preservation or helping the self-preservation of another fellow human. That, people, is a right of necessity. And my right of individuals, personal worship. I can use anything on this planet in order to meet that indispensable obligation of my understanding, my belief, my command says what is and is not necessary. Not yours, not you, Mr. Government Man, who's attacked that the Constitution, who's violated it, who's violated me, my family. You're violated by the fact that you're not honorable and you don't act true. You write legislative acts that are in strict violation of the Constitution. Hmm? Talk about a democracy. We have a republic here. Hmm? Claim it was an airplane crashed in the Pentagon. No evidence of a commercial jet airliner, and yet you have lied about that. You have allowed your other governmental organizations out here in the states, the city, the county, the school district to extort, embezzle. Huh? Sums are so big, it's not a calculator big enough on the planet to even figure out how much it is. Their comprehensive annual financial reporting, which you guys are all in government sign off on, applying future liabilities against current assets. That's fine. You can do that all you want. We got to fund future liabilities. Where's the money at right now? Where's the accounts that it's supposed to be sitting into? You say it's according to GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices. Nowhere in GAAP does allow you to apply future liabilities against current assets, take that money off the balance sheet without having a record of it where it's at. And if you've been doing that for, I don't know, 50 plus years now, why is it all my liabilities today aren't fucking paid already with all the money you've already taken to be applied towards future liabilities that you won't tell me, won't designate to me what the specifics of those are? No, you, Mr. Government Man, you, Mr. Law Enforcement Agent, who haven't spoken out about these things, about 9/11, demanded investigation, about the accounting practices that you are a beneficiary of. Huh? You are receiving benefits from the proceeds of a criminal enterprise. Your governments have all incorporated. They've become private corporations according to their own definitions. Okay? So, my rights of necessity, my rights remaining from the state of primitive communion, my right of individual to engage in personal worship using any substance on this planet that I deem necessary, are superior to your compelling interests. Always. Why? Because governments were instituted to protect my indispensable obligations, my ability to meet those. Always. As long as I'm not doing what? Infringing and damaging. Now they say, oh yeah, all those marijuana, cannabis, all that, those dangerous cartels. Yeah, same thing with prohibition on alcohol. Okay? People don't get murdered over alcohol sales. Oh, they murder when they get all drunked up. Okay? So, that's my right of necessity, my rights remaining from the primitive state of communion, my right of personal worship, my rights to engage in any activity I deem necessary, my life, my liberty, pursuit of happiness, working towards my own perfection, being of service to my other fellow men. So, next video, we're going to talk about what happens when you government type people violate, attack that Constitution, which you have done. You have no authority. See, habeas corpus still, as far as I know, has not been, prohibited, repealed. What's habeas corpus? That's the right to be brought in front of a lawful magistrate. There isn't a single lawful magistrate anywhere in the United States of America. Anywhere. All right. Love everybody. And I'll talk to you later.